to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from our Telesur studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with our news. You stay with us. We begin. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned human rights are under assault from a number of threats, including the climate crisis, the misuse of digital technology, and power-hungry leaders. Guterres launched a call to action to advance and protect the human rights of all peoples at the opening of the 43rd session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva. Guterres pledges the United Nations with the necessary support of the international community will be there to protect those in need. UN, with the help of others, will be there to protect the rights of minorities, to ensure gender equality and equal rights for women, also stated the Secretary General. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that U.S. is following an egocentric foreign policy that is leading to global arms control agreements being devalued. Lavrov urged Washington to resume talks on halting nuclear proliferation and banning weapons in space.
Recently, in U.S. policies, we have seen a growing aspiration to dominate everywhere and to impose upon the international community its own rules to the detriment of the other states and international law.
And Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza thanked members of the United Nations Human Rights Council for voting to give his country a seat at the meeting despite opposition from the United States.
The
ideological extremism that has been cultivated by the White House resulted in the decision to deprive Venezuela of its right to participate in this council, launching an unusual and unprecedented series of pressure, blackmail, and even extortion towards member states siding with Venezuela. They were attacked in their capitals and during international forums. To carry out this strategy, they also used a group of countries in the region with leaders happy to be obedient. So, on behalf of Venezuelan people, we thank all the countries that supported the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela during these particular circumstances.
Meanwhile, the Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez pointed out that U.S. sanctions on countries around the world heavily affect the right for health of about 67 million people. That was referring to the attacks made by the United States to the Cuban medical brigades. I wish some of them give health benefits to those that now are without the health care.
Just with the suspension of the Cuban Health Workers Corporation in several regional countries, at least 67 million people have been seriously affected. The international community recognizes the professionalism of the more than 400,000 health workers who have accomplished mission in 164 countries over the last 56 years.
We change topic. A committee of Colombia's National Assembly has decided to open an investigation into President Iván Duque following statements made by the fugitive Senator Aida Merlano about corruption among the Colombian political elite. After lawmakers David Racero and Fabián Díaz on the Green Party presented an accusation before a congressional committee to investigate President Iván Duque, the committee decided to open an investigation against Duque for the crimes of vote buying and attempted mass slaughter. This after former Senator Aida Merlano, who is now in detention in Venezuela, gave statements to a Colombian media. The Colombian Constitutional Court ruled out that the country's president now can initiate peace talks with illegal armed groups without the approval of the National Security Council. Before, the law limited the power of the president to sign peace agreements with armed groups by providing that the National Security Council would determine when a criminal group met the requirements to be considered an organized armed group and would define the conditions for peace talks with the government. Some lawmakers welcomed the decision, saying that the court's ruling clears the way for restarting negotiations with the Liberation National Army, the ELN. We keep moving on. An 11-member Commonwealth Observer Group has arrived to Guyana to accompany next Monday's general elections. Over the next 3 days, the group will meet the Guyana Election Commission, political parties and civil society groups, as well as the media and the people. And the police, I must say. The group's mission is to ensure that all processes are in keeping with Guyana's laws and its regional and international commitments. The group was invited by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Guyana's ruling coalition has backed the Elections Commission decision to reduce the use of private residences as polling stations, saying it would make more credible elections. The opposition has rejected the move to use public buildings or tents instead. In Egypt, former President Hosni Mubarak has died at the age of 91 in the capital Cairo, according to state media. Mubarak reportedly died at a hospital after undergoing an unspecified surgery. Former president spent nearly 3 decades in office before he was arrested by military 2011 following weeks of protests during the so-called Arab Spring. He was found guilty of complicity in the killing of protesters during the uprising. The conviction was subsequently overturned and he was freed in March 2017. And we move on to USA. United States had the possibility for the senator of the Democrats Party, Bernie Sanders, to win the presidential nomination increase in the face of presidential elections in November. The chances for Sanders to White House has increased after he won in 2 of the 3 states where Democrats' board celebrated its primaries. Even though media and in power groups of his own party tried to hide it, his advance could gain further momentum if he wins in the elections of the so-called Super Tuesday set on May 3rd. Sanders' speech, which defined himself as a socialist, is focused in the response to problems that faces education, health, and minimum wage. His followers and collaborators assured that Sanders came to stay, aiming to build a movement that gave voice to the working class. Like this, we go for a first break. Remember, you can find this and much more other information if you follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account at Laura P. Telesur. We'll be right back.
La explotación de los países pobres por los países ricos debe cesar.
Nuestros pobres, nuestros excluidos, nuestros países, nuestra democracia ya no soportan más que sigamos hablando en voz baja.
El presente sigue abierto y el futuro en disputa.
We are back with our news. In China, Hubei province officials set up new temporary hospitals with capacity to treat 30,000 patients. Wuhan, central China, Hubei province, an epicenter of the coronavirus epidemic, has activated 16 temporary hospitals and plans to open more, bringing the total number of reserved beds for COVID-19 patients with mild symptoms. Every temporary hospital will have CT scans and other equipment to improve their medical treatment capability.
We started to transform the workshop building into a temporary hospital from February the 15th. Over 1,500 construction workers were working during the busiest period, and we completed the main body project construction in about 3 days.
Our correspondent in Beijing, Iranzi Peraza, has the latest updates from the coronavirus. Let's welcome her. Welcome, Iranzi.
Greetings. Chinese authorities have reported that 406 new cases were confirmed on Tuesday, a drop on Monday's 508, bringing the total number of cases in mainland China to 78,064 and 2,715 deaths. On the new 406 new cases, of the 406 new cases, 401 were reported in Hubei province, the epicenter of the outbreak. 52 people died from COVID-19 in Hubei province on Tuesday. Further than the 68 reported on Monday, there was one new confirmed case in the province of Shandong, 2 in Sichuan, 1 in Hebei, as well as 4 new confirmed cases in Hong Kong and 1 in Taiwan. China has also quarantined 94 air passengers arriving from Seoul after 3 people on the flight were discovered to have fevers. Even as the number of fresh cases declines at the epicenter of the disease in China, there has been a sudden increase in parts of Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. South Korea has reported the 11th death and 169 more cases of new coronavirus, mostly and in around Duke, bringing the total infections to 1,146. Switzerland, Spain, Austria, Algeria, and Croatia have reported their first cases, and the death raising in Italy to 11. In Iran, the death toll due to the coronavirus has racked 16, making it the highest number of deaths from coronavirus outside China. Even Iran's deputy health minister, Ira Harishi, has been infected and is under quarantine. In Geneva, the Dr. Bruce Alward, who headed the Joint World Health Organization China's mission to Wuhan, called for countries to prepare for a potential pandemic. He allayed the measures taken in China, but told reporters that other nations were simply not ready for raging the outbreak.
Thank you, Iramsi. And reports are just in from Brazil that a test for COVID-19 undertaken on a 61-year-old patient in Sao Paulo came back positive. Authorities announced that a second test will be conducted this Wednesday, and the patient had recently returned from Italy. The health ministry is due to make an official announcement this Wednesday morning. As you have on your screens, our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Andre Vieira, tweeted, and he specified that this Wednesday the health authorities will pronounce themselves. And French health authorities announced 2 new cases of infection by COVID-19 virus. One of the 9 affected is a French citizen who had been in Lombardy region in Italy. He was hospitalized in the east of France, and the second was a Chinese woman who came back from her country past February 7th and is hospitalized in Paris in stable conditions. With these 2 cases, the number of infected increased to 14, 11 of whom has been recovered and 1 has died. And the Iranian deputy health minister has been infected with the coronavirus. Iraq Harirshi appeared at a news conference on Monday where he seemed to be sweating and coughed repeatedly. Later, he posted a video from his hospital confinement where he confirmed the infection. The Iranian authorities have confirmed 95 cases of coronavirus 19 in the country so far, with 15 deaths.
I too have been infected with coronavirus. I've had a fever since last night, and my preliminary test came back positive around midnight. I've isolated myself somewhere since. This is a democratic virus. It does not discriminate between the rich and the poor. Look after yourselves.
And Italy has announced 3 new coronavirus deaths in the Lombardy region. It brings the number of people who have died from the infection in the country to 10.
We recorded the deaths of 3 people over the last few hours. 3 people in Lombardy. 3 people who are over 80.
In Spain, in the Canary Islands, in Tenerife, hundreds of tourists, mainly from Britain and other European countries, have been locked up in a hotel after an Italian guest tested positive for COVID-19 and his wife. The infected tourist is reportedly a doctor from Italy's northern region, where most of Italy's cases, 322 cases, have been concentrated. Like this, we go for a short break. Remember, you can have this and much more other information on our website, telesurenglish.net.
Who's moving the chessmen? What interests motivate the actors behind each event? The board is deployed there. Critical Move investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on Telesur.
We are back with our news. The G5 Sahel Region Generals Assembly has started in Mauritania. Representatives from Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger are gathered in the capital in Nouakchott to discuss security matters affecting West Africa. During the summit, Mauritania is set to assume the rotating G5 Sahel presidency tasked with coordinating the fight against irregular armed groups in the region.
Despite several international initiatives, the Libyan crisis continues to deepen and become more complex. Unfortunately, it continues to fuel and strengthen the activities of terrorist groups in the Sahel through the illicit trafficking of arms, munitions, drugs, and human beings.
The first task of this coalition is to strengthen the synergy between the 4 pillars of our joint action: military action, the capacity building of the G5 armed forces, the return of the state through internal security governance, and support to the key government institutions, the stabilization and development.
Ethiopia announced on Tuesday it would release dozens of high-profile prisoners, including opposition activists, held over an alleged coup and other high-ranking government critics. A spokesperson for the Attorney General's office said investigations had been dropped against 63 individuals and they would be released for the national good. Hundreds were arrested in the aftermath of violence in June last year in the north of the country that left 5 high-ranking officials dead and heaped pressure on a government struggling to cope with ethnic tensions. A government spokesperson said the move sought to widen the political and democratic space in the country. And after almost 6 years, a major bridge is nearing completion, which will connect Zambia and Botswana and ultimately the port of Durban in South Africa to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The much anticipated Kasungula Bridge, extending over 900 meters, is a vital part of Africa's north-south corridor and expected to be open to the public by the end of 2020. The opening of the bridge is almost 2 years behind schedule, and the project was expected to be completed in 2018 but was brought to halt when it was alleged that the Zambian government had failed to meet loan payments. The bridge plays an important role for the Southern African Development Community to create one-stop border pass between several nations. And that African trade unions have called for nationwide protests against austerity measures proposed by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni. General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, Sewelinsima Vavi, called on citizens to reject attempts to force the working class to bear the burden of the crisis caused by failed neoliberal policies the government embraced despite warnings from the labor movement. Mboweni is on February 26 expected to unveil a set of austerity measures, including a wage freeze for all public service workers and retrenchment of thousands of workers from state-owned companies. And thousands of Algerian students have marched in the streets of Algiers, marking the first anniversary since they joined the protest movement. Student protesters have continued calling for a complete replacement of the current political elite who have replaced the former government. The demonstrations started on February 22, 2018, after President Abdelaziz Bouteflika announced he intended to run for a fifth period term of presidency. Students joined the other protesting groups a few days later.
We came out for the first anniversary of the student demonstrations to renew our mandate to bring down the tyranny that is descending on the Algerians. We did not come out to celebrate the first anniversary. We will not celebrate it until we have our independence.
And Indian police have reinforced security in the capital, New Delhi, as the number of people killed in protests against the citizenship law rose to 13. Police have blocked roads to restrict movement in the capital and imposed restrictions on large gatherings in the area, as mostly anti-Muslim rioters set fire to buildings and vehicles and attacked journalists. At least 150 people have been injured in the violence. The new citizenship law has raised worries that President Narendra Modi wants to remold secular India into a Hindu nation while marginalizing the country's 200 million Muslims.
The protesters have left Jafrabad metro station and the Mojpur chowk is also clear. Now this road, 66 Futa road, is absolutely clear of all protests and all things.
And we change topic. We talk about traditions. How Brazil's carnival have been a site of resistance since before the dictatorship era of 1970s. Our correspondent Brian Muir has the story on this material.
Brazil has thousands of street-running groups called blocos, all shapes and sizes, formed in neighborhoods across the country, and each one has its own story. This is the story of Charanga Gelata, a small bloco that was formed to protest the dictatorship during the 1970s.
We were a group of workers at the aluminium plant who started playing together during our lunch break, and so we decided to start a bloco.
As union resistance to the dictatorship grew in the late 70s, the Bloco began to appear at strikes and protests, always playing along but never singing. Their silent voices were their form of protesting the government's silencing of the workers.
The aluminium plant workers had little time to fraternize together, but they decided to use their days off to hold protests, and this transformed into a kind of voiceless protest, in which they just beat their drums, which were all secretly made by hand inside the factory.
40 years later, Charanga Gelata has become a beloved local carnival tradition. Brian Mir, Telesur, Ouro Preto.
And from these images of traditions in Brazil, we move to the Caribbean. Trinidad and Tobago's carnival celebrations are on the final stretch, with masqueraders flooding the streets across the country. Tuesday's events are considered pretty massive, with revelers covered in color, feathers, beads and sequins. Prime Minister Kid Rowley played a sailor with his all-time favorite band, Trinidad All Stars. He joined the people of different shapes and sizes who jumped to soca music. While crossing the stage, the most popular song played in front of the judges is expected to win the coveted Road March title. We keep in the Caribbean, watching their celebrations of this carnival. In Dominica is also celebrating carnival with traditional characters like moco jumbies or stilt walkers being portrayed. Revelers dance behind music trucks to beat soca music as spectators line the streets to get a glimpse of the beautiful costume in all their splendor. A big part of the nation's culture, masqueraders dance and praise on the final day of the festivities, expected to end later on Tuesday night. And like this, we come to the end of this news brief, but of course the invitation is made. You can continue with us, with Telesur, always together, connecting our global thoughts. And now, before we end, we'll leave you with this video of colorful tradition of carnival around the world. Until next time, thank you for watching.